Welcome to the Leadership and Yoga podcast hosted by me, Shawna Krueger. And on this podcast, I'll be bringing you interviews with exceptional leaders in the yoga world alongside trainings and tips so you can experience true breakthroughs and help others do the same. Welcome to my actual coffee chat today. Got to take a little sip here. Cheers to you for being here, and welcome into an episode on getting over the fear of teaching yoga, or also getting comfortable teaching yoga. I haven't decided what I want to actually call it, because I know that we're supposed to frame things in the positive, but sometimes, that element of fear, I really wouldn't be making this episode if it were not for the fact that I have experienced legitimate fear of teaching yoga. And I asked myself many times, why am I pushing myself to do this when this is absolutely terrifying for me? I felt the same way about speaking as well, but I really firmly believe that even those things that we have such a resistance to, and at the same time we feel sort of a draw, kind of a longing, a little whisper, whatever you want to call it, it's because there is something there for us. There is absolutely something there for us. That has been the case for me as well with public speaking. And actually, I've realized that yoga teaching and public speaking have become very parallel for me, because I find that both of them are a way of serving and showing up and inspiring. And so welcome in, even if you're not a yoga teacher yet, if you don't intend to ever become a yoga teacher, teaching yoga is deeply symbolic for so many other things that we have to do in our lives, or we get to do in our lives, or we push ourselves to do in our lives, because you're standing up in front of a room of people for an hour, sometimes up to an hour and a half, right? With these longer classes, which are not as popular these days, but man, I love a 90-minute class whenever I can take one. And you're there speaking, performing in a sense, not that it should be performative, but you are using your body to demo. And at the same time, you're having to be super alert. You don't get the luxury of just looking above the crowd and not ever actually looking at the people in front of you. You're doing all of those things. And there's, the feeling, right? So much can go wrong in an hour and a half. Like, what if you need to use the bathroom? What if you have a coughing attack, right? What if you forget what you're going to say? What if you freak out and can't continue on, and you have, 20 people in front of you and you have an hour left? What do you do, right? So even if you're not going to use this episode specifically for teaching yoga, I am almost 100% sure, I will have to say I am 100% sure that these lessons that I've gathered today for us, well, it sounds very formal, what I've gathered us here today to discuss, they're going to be applicable to you as well. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to try to skip the really obvious ones, like keep practicing and all of that. I'm going to try to get into the things that, as I just right before recording this did a little mental checklist of the things that I still get hung up on, even 3 years into my teaching journey, what I still get nervous about, and what really are the sort of triggers for fear that come up for me in the past and currently. And again, I'm really only doing this episode not because I'm somebody that naturally feels ultra confident in front of others and conversations. Sometimes I feel awkward in the elevator. Okay. So, like, where do I look? Do I engage? And the more that I've just pushed myself to engage, so many doors have opened, so many things have changed for me. And so I'm really here to hopefully inspire you, and also give you a soothing pat on the back and say, it's okay, because of the fact that you have the fear and you have the discomfort, what you end up delivering, and when you make it through that, what you share is going to be so much richer. It is going to be treasured, because you know what it's like to be not able to share, right? So before we get into everything, I have some noticias. I have some news here for you. And this first one is that if you are listening right now, pretty please, I know that it's inconvenient, but can you take a moment and drop me a rating, and also consider, out of the kindness of your heart, sharing my episode with a friend, either directly or on social media. I see all of those, and I'm deeply thankful for it, because this whole machine in the podcasting world is driven by you all, by the listeners. And I'm really reliant on that. I'm not relying on some other magical secret algorithm behind the scenes of being able to get my show continuing to grow. And we've got a really nice momentum going on. So please take a moment, drop me a rating, make sure you're subscribed and share. And you can pause me while you do that. I'll be here waiting when you come back. All right, welcome back. Did you rate my show? Did you subscribe? I know you did. Thank you. I appreciate you. Second little noticia here that I have for you is that the podcast launchpad is up and running. We're starting in November. There is still plenty of time, and I'm really, really excited at what we've got going on here because, as I just mentioned, podcasting has helped me a lot with my ability to teach and the ability to trust that when I go to open my mouth and I'm not 100% prepared, that I can trust what's going to come out, even if sometimes what's going to come out is I don't know. That's okay too, right? Take a pause. But at the end of the day, the podcasting has been something that has unlocked so many doors for me and also unlocked levels of self-development that literally nothing else that I've done, including coaching, including, journaling, including reflecting, including retreats and all of these other things. This amount of sitting with myself, I mean, we're now up over 100 episodes in about a year and coming up on 2 years in November. So that's pretty fun. We get to do a little 2-year celebration if you join the podcast launchpad as well. But that amount of sitting with yourself, you will never be the same afterwards in the best way. I can assure you that, because when you have to open your mouth, you have to get pretty clear on what it is that you want to say in a short amount of time. And I think that skill is extremely valuable in whatever you do. So if you're looking to find your voice, if you're looking to start a show, even if you don't know exactly what it would be on, also if you want to come learn and hang out and get in a room with, like-minded people, come join us. I am excited about this offering, and this is kind of a temporary thing. This is while I'm still thinking about what it's like to start a podcast, while it's all fresh for me, and this isn't going to exist much in the future. So if you're finding this episode, a year or something after it was produced, this may not be around anymore, but we're here for a good time with the podcast launchpad, not a long time. So come join us if you want to do that. I will leave the link in the show notes for you. All right. Here is our agenda. Well, the agenda today is that I'm going to move you through kind of a stream of consciousness download of the order that I feel like these tips make sense. So I'm actually not going to, lay out 10 tips or whatever for you today, but I'm also going to be sharing at the end a special piece that I wrote, and you will have seen it here first. So when you see it again on Instagram, you can act surprised and be like, oh my gosh, this is so original. This is so great. Like, thank you for sharing. Just kidding. You don't need to do that. Don't comment fake things on my stuff, only the real feelings. But perhaps this little share will be inspiring to you. And I'm excited to share it as well, because I've been writing more recently. I used to be the kind of kid that I would climb up in the tree and I would be in my feels and I would write poetry in a comp book for many hours. You may know this about me, but that fizzled out, I don't know, somewhere around university, I think I just got so in my head about getting the good grades, and man, I wasn't even doing anything else besides studying, but I did end up with a 3.98 GPA. So I studied hard, but that sort of intellectual push, it locked me out of a side of creativity of mine that I actually had to go back and re-unlock. So it can be done. We talk a lot about this coming back into what would your inner child do? And sometimes it feels silly to me, but seriously, it feels good. That's what I can tell you. So I'm going to share a little piece that I wrote that feels like it deeply belongs in this conversation about teaching others and just all the different things that have to go into a yoga class, because it's a complex thing. It's not a simple sort of thing that we do. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with my number one piece of advice for getting over the fear of teaching yoga and feeling a little bit more comfortable, which is don't set expectations. Do not set expectations. We will get a real pretty picture of how it's going to go in our head. and everything is going to be just right. The students are going to be just as they imagined that, just as you imagined that they will be. And then the reality, once you get there, is probably more than likely going to be completely different. This is not to say don't visualize yourself teaching. I think visualization can be really wonderful. You can visualize how you want people to feel. But as far as the details, get there and do a scan. And in that moment, that's when you're able to set the expectation of, okay, this is probably how class is going to go. These are probably the things that I will actually end up doing. It's great to make a plan, and I will talk about making a plan and how to prepare properly later on in the episode. But releasing the expectations is just the number one thing, because it also is going to have a really big impact on how you feel about the class afterwards. I had a teacher of mine tell me that if you like 1 in 4 of the classes that you teach, you're doing pretty well. 1 in 4. And I would have to say that I don't know what my exact number would be on how many of the classes I actually like, but I will tell you that sometimes the classes that I really like, where I feel like I'm really on fire, are not the classes that I get the most feedback on. And so it's really kind of irrelevant at the end of the day, this whole ranking system. But if you get caught in that habit of like, wow, I've taught 3 classes now and I haven't really liked them, you're putting yourself in danger of shutting yourself out of teaching potentially, or making yourself stuck in some imaginary rut that's actually not there, because there was no rut in the first place. It's been invented in your mind because of your expectation. I got a really cool lesson on not setting expectations and getting your hopes high this weekend, because I went and I stayed in Eastern Washington in this trailer park. And I know I've mentioned this trailer park before. I'll tell you guys the name in case it's of curiosity to any of you here locally, or if you're visiting Washington State, because it's a pretty cool spot. It's called Cooley Lodge Resort. The word resort is extremely misleading. Like, that in itself would be an expectation killer. But I've been there many, many years before, so I already knew it was not going to be a resort experience. But anyways, we get there and we're trying to find a place to eat on the first night that we were there with a group of friends. So we're walking around, and this one place had amazing reviews. It was Italian food. We walked up, we could smell it. It was like, yes, this is the spot. How did we get so lucky to find this incredible restaurant in the middle of nowhere? Like, what an oasis, because there were only like 3 restaurants in that town. And we go in and they're like, sorry, we're at capacity for tonight. No more walk-ins, reservation only. And I was like, reservation only? Excuse me, Soap Lake. Like, I didn't know. I was not in the know that we needed to have reservations here. So anyways, we go out and we're like, you know what? I wonder if they do takeout. We should call and see if we can get pizzas. So we call, and we'd been looking at a few other restaurants. My friend calls and they pick up and we're like, do you take takeout orders? And they said yes. And we're like, yeah, all right, here we go. So we spent like 15-20 minutes deciding all the different things we're getting, because it's a little bit complicated with a group, you know, and we're all getting really excited about the options, reading it. Like, we're just like, oh, this is going to be great. We can take it back and we can eat it by the lake. It's going to be magical. And then we call back and we start giving the order. And the first thing we tried to order was the Caesar salads. 2 Caesar salads, please. And the woman goes, 2 taco salads? And we're like, what? No, 2 Caesar salads. And she goes, 2 house salads? And then it just starts to sink in a little bit, especially because we can hear Spanish being spoken in the background. And I was like, did we accidentally call the Mexican food place instead of the Italian place? And sure enough, we had called the wrong restaurant, and we had got our artificial confirmation that we could order. And it turns out, long story short, which this was not really that short of a way of telling the story, but hang with me here because I have a point to make on this one. We could not order the food that we got so excited about, and we had to go to the Mexican food place because it was the only other place open. So we go there and we're kind of like, oh my gosh, that sucks. You know, we were laughing about it. It was super funny, but at the same time, you're kind of disappointed, right? Because what you had imagined is just, it's actually not at all going to become reality. And we get there And the food at the Mexican place was phenomenal. We were in awe. It was so good. And we were like, why were we avoiding this? And it just goes to show you that sometimes you don't get exactly what you were expecting, but it can be better if you open yourself to it. And I think what I just want to say here on this is that we get a lot of FOMO, if we see the teacher who's teaching in the most deluxe popular studio and we see her little videos of people in Shavasana so that, it's not as weird that you're recording people while they're laying down and you don't get their faces as much. And it's like a very full class and you're like, if only that could be me. And I'm here, at this other studio and I only have 6 students. But what you may not know is that those 6 students, one of them may become your future best friend. They may become, I've seen it happen, not to me, of course, actually not at all, because Simone does not do yoga, but I've seen it happen where that's become your partner, your future partner. You just never know whose life you're going to change and what's going to become of it. So don't get too much FOMO on the setting not being right or the student number not being right or whatever not being exactly as you imagined it, because it will happen that the music will not work during class. The space will be noisy, the space will be colder, the space will be warmer sometimes than you expect it to be. And, maybe a worker needs to come through and walk and disturb, the middle of your class for something, right? So trying to get it out of your mind, this fairy tale class experience. That's what I can say right off the bat. And something that's really huge if you are a newer teacher is that the world loves an underdog. Even if you're not a newer teacher, but you don't consider yourself to be a popular teacher, whatever that means, right? You don't picture yourself as one of a teacher that could be a headliner for a festival or something. If you don't picture yourself like that now and you realize that you're an underdog, good. Because the world loves an underdog. They love an underdog. They will support you. They will want you to succeed. That is a fact. So that's what I want to say about setting expectations. Next up, make it about the message and the experience. And by this, I don't mean make it all about the students. Actually, I've heard that a lot. I don't disagree with it. I think that you should have in mind what the students in front of you need. But what I mostly mean is that you want to make it all about the experience and not all about you. You are going to be a central focal point, and I'm actually going to talk about how you can fill up the space and fill the room. But right off the bat here, I want to say that there have been many, many times, and I've done this myself too, where you want to excuse yourself. You want to preface something. You want to say, hey, I've had a really hard day, so if my words don't come out, right? There's just this desire to, as you step up in front of a room of people, for them to understand where you're coming from. And what I can tell you is that is not important, and it is actually often quite distracting. So that may or may not land. That may be, you might not agree with that at all. But as much as you can, picture the experience. Maybe you just decide, if you've had a really hard day, that the experience you want to bring today to the students is one that is a little bit more centered, a little bit slower perhaps, or a little bit simpler than you usually teach. And that's a way that you adjust and you adapt, but you don't need to involve them in the behind the scenes of it, because they're not there for that. They're there for the experience of it. And it's okay for you to be connected with them, but there are many other ways that you can connect that don't involve you sort of dumping whatever it is that you feel like is here on your shoulders. You've got this, right? You can show up however, it doesn't really matter. But you want to make sure too that you're designing the experience mindfully ahead of time and in the moment. This comes back to the adjusting to what is happening right in the moment and at the same time being prepared enough that you aren't afraid. Because a lot of times when we have intense fear, it means that we have not prepared properly. And when we're just nervous, that means that we're ready. That means that we care. And that quote came from my coach, Sebastian Little. I've shared it a couple of times and I will continue to do so because it was such a light bulb moment for me on the difference between why sometimes I would feel actually afraid and why in other moments I would get the nervous, excited jitters, but then after a few minutes, you just get in the role and everything is going well, and you're just, that excitement fades into kind of like a hyper-focused on state rather than teaching a whole class in fear and kind of like actually blacking out when you teach a class. I have experienced that. I have seriously experienced a class where I'm like, I don't know what I said. I don't know how I got through it because I was so afraid. And that would happen a lot, especially in the first month or two that I started teaching. So if that happens to you, I feel you. I want to give a note on creativity here when we're talking about the experience, because this is another thing that would make me really worked up, was because I was reinventing the wheel every single time that I would teach. I was redesigning a flow. I wanted to have the most creative flow. I didn't want a single remnant to be there and repeated from before. And then I had to ask myself the point of it all. Is the point of it all a competition to have the most creative flow? Or is it, on the other extreme of that, to be the most strict stickler of the rules of a certain form of practice? Is it to perfectly, like a textbook, explain the poses in detail and the exact cues? I mean, the whole list of cues that to kind of flex your knowledge, to show them I know my shit. What is the point, right? And it comes back to, in my opinion, the experience that you want people to have. If you're finding yourself saying, well, I want them to feel creative, I want them to feel flowy, then that's wonderful. But probably people don't learn things, right? You've practiced this flow several times, perhaps in your head, and in order to remember what you were going to do, or you've written it down, you've thought it out, you've designed it, but that does not translate to them feeling flowy and creative necessarily the first time that they see that particular flow. So just checking in on that. I've actually found, and I've heard other teachers recommend this as well, that in the first few months and years, I can't say in the first few years because I still am in the first few years, what tends to be helpful and what has been helpful for me is learning a semi-set sequence, actually multiple of them. I teach Rocket, I teach a progressive Ashtanga, and I also am familiar with Baptiste style flows, although I've never been trained in it. But it's been helpful for me to have a structure, a set sense of structure, or another alternative one that I have somewhat invented. But when I have to go and I have to sub Hatha, or I have to go and I sub a power flow, that's my go-to skeleton of a sequence. And I've stuck with that because then I have a better sense of time management and I'm able to actually assist people. And, it's kind of like when you start driving, right? When you first start driving, I remember I was like gripping the wheel, and I also had a manual. So I had to shift at the same time. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about when I need to shift and when the hills are coming, and you're trying to look at, people in front of you doing weird things and staying away from the, people there. And then there's someone crossing the street and it's like, oh my gosh, how could I ever do anything else? And then before you know it, you're like driving to work, drinking a smoothie out of one cup and like eating a muffin out of the other, and then putting the smoothie and holding it with your legs and shifting. Like, not that you should do that because it's dangerous, but we do it, right? Because we get comfortable. And so when you're in that phase of trying to, keep your eyes on the road, sometimes that set sequence or just taking a little bit of the need to reinvent the wheel out of the equation can be can be really, really helpful to you, and it may be something worth looking at. Another note here on cueing and safety, as we're talking about remembering the point of class and the experience, I have found that cueing in this order has been the most helpful for me. This is what I tend to do and I try to do, which is I say the breath, I say the pose, and then I say description. So I would say inhale, Urdhva Hastasana, arms up, right? And you could argue some of them it's okay to say inhale, arms up, Urdhva Hastasana, call the name of the pose. But when you're moving into more complex poses, if you're describing that pose before you give the name of it, a student that already knows the name of the pose, and is there kind of playing the guessing game, like, I think we're going to half moon, but I don't know. But if you're sitting there describing, like, all right, weight into your leg, lean forward, start to stack the hips, lift your arm up, half moon. It's not as efficient, and it can make a little bit of a clunkier experience for more advanced students. Take it or leave it. That is what I've found on cueing and what's made me feel comfortable. Also, major note here, may be controversial. I will give that disclaimer, but you cannot protect someone from getting hurt by your words alone. It is dangerous, actually, for a student to assume that you as the teacher alone can keep them safe, because at the end of the day, especially with people who are very eager and who maybe haven't done as much physical exercise, you can say all the cues in the world and it might just go like this, and they just right over their head, right? If you're not watching the video. And that is often what I find happening. You can actually look at somebody, verbally tell them something, which you wouldn't know, which would not have known until probably a year into my yoga teaching journey, because I did not look at people like that because I was trying to stay on the road. But you can look at them and you can give them a verbal direction and they can hear you. You can get the confirmation that they hear you, and they can sometimes do the opposite thing than what you want them to do or what you're asking them to do. So yes, keep your eyes open, state the big things, especially the things that are sensitive areas of the body. And that is going to be determined by the type of practice that you're teaching. And for me, my own experience, right? Like when I've had injuries in a particular pose, I cannot help but giving those particular safety cues that I know could have avoided that injury. Or if I have friends, other teachers, colleagues that I've heard stories of, absolutely, right? But to go through the whole class with a sense of fear, or to go through the whole class and just throw people into the deep end, also not cool. Neither one of those are going to make for an enjoyable experience. So that is an invitation to do a little bit of research and also to think about what it is that you're just kind of repeating. And maybe that stuff is coming from other people rather than your own intuitive doubts. I don't know what it was, but I started getting this intuitive feeling where I started to really worry about people's shoulders because I'm teaching a lot of handstands. And I had a big sit down with my teacher and I asked him, like, how do shoulders dislocate? Like, I'm having this fear. I don't know where it's coming from, but like, what causes it? What can I do if it happens? Like, what would make it happen? And all the different scenarios. Do that kind of stuff, get bit by bit, start to get that better understanding for things. And then you'll know if it's really necessary for you to say that particular safety cue when you are in class. A note on assisting as well. I know this one on the experience of class is getting really long, but this is kind of the bulk of what I want to say about teaching. And this little note on assisting is that I would recommend that you start to get comfortable with hands-on assisting. And this has been such a battle for me recently because it is one of the things that I think single-handedly made me stand out from other teachers, especially in the city where I'm teaching, because it's just not a super popular thing to do, to put your hands on people. And one, because space, right? In Seattle, I feel like we're a little bit more reserved and it's a little bit more, hands off. And then after the pandemic, right, all these different things. But learning to give assists is absolutely going to be beneficial. Most everybody really enjoys assists, and it makes them feel seen. It makes them feel, even just walking by them, even if it's not about, and it should never be about just like correcting, right? I always tell people it's not that I'm correcting you. I'm actually taking you deeper, usually, into this posture. But nowadays, I've focused less of my time on the training for teaching. I'm not teaching like I was at 1.7 classes a week. My goal is to be around the 3 class mark. And that's what I'm going to continue with, because I have these other projects on the media side of things. But I refuse to let this skill of assisting go away. It's something that I will continue to invest in, because when I do teach, I just think that it's key. And so you're going to want to get lots and lots of reps and lots of different types of bodies, because that's the thing. You go to yoga teacher training and you practice on somebody who's already done a triangle pose 1,000 times in their life. And then you get into a class and you have someone who's never done a downward facing dog before, and even assisting their down dog then is going to become incredibly complex, and you're going to think, what did I even learn? So you've got to really practice it until you feel like you could walk up to anybody, even if you don't know them, and even if their level makes you uncomfortable. Get good at assisting beginners. That is something that is a huge non-negotiable skill. And on the topic of non-negotiables, I actually make it a non-negotiable for myself. In the first minute of class, I mean, not the first minute, but let's say the first, within the sun salutations, I will make sure to have assisted 2 to 3 people. I will have made sure to break that ice, because otherwise there's the risk of, I'll do it later in class. Guess what? No, you're not, because it's just going to get harder the more that you go on in class. So try to set aside time for this, because aside from public speaking, which we'll keep talking about here, I would say that learning to assist and being comfortable with that has been the other number one skill that has made me feel much more comfortable with being in a room, right? Because adding that element of not just walking around pacing, but actually walking with purpose and looking at people, because when you look at them and then you don't touch them or you don't say anything, it's kind of weird. So for me, I was able to break that ice with looking with an intention of, can I touch this person here? Can I point to this and activate this a little bit more? Can we bring this open? Whatever it is. Anyways, enough of that little rant there. But I will say, see people, and this goes along with what I was just talking about, but see people for really who they are, which sounds deep, but don't judge yourself through other people's eyes. Do not judge yourself through other people's eyes. And what I mean by that is, when you're looking at someone, you're seeing their face, and then you're thinking that is a reflection of something that you are doing and you don't know, right? See that person for the complex being that they are, for the day that they've had, for how they may be feeling in this practice, in this stretch, whatever it is. But let them decide. Don't speak for them. I don't think that they would like being spoken for, in a sense. When I started my apprenticeship that I have with my teacher, my first day, the task that I was given was just to see people, just stop seeing bodies. And I had to learn everybody's names too before I could assist them. And it was just to see people. And I cannot explain to you, I don't know how to make this more clear, because I don't think that it's going to make sense unless it's making sense, unless you've experienced it and you kind of know what I'm talking about. But the minute that you can really start to see people and not just see like these reflections of things that you think, it's not about you a lot of the time. So don't get hung up on that. And it's also such a beautiful experience to teach when you're able to really see people and to get to know them and to have those connections with them. At the same time, this goes with this topic of seeing people, that you're not everybody's teacher and you will never be everybody's teacher. Get immune to rejection. and at the same time be attuned for feedback, of course, but really get used to the fact that most everything that is impactful to us is polarizing. We like it and we feel drawn to it because it is polarizing, because it moves us. We are attracted to movement, right? So the sooner that you can just stop trying to please everybody, right? The usual thing, but for real, understand the experience that you're trying to bring. If you're bringing in an energetic experience, I know, right? Some of the times people are coming into my class, they're expecting like a normal vinyasa sort of class. And I totally know, and I can see it in their face that they are overwhelmed. And I do my best in that moment to offer up alternatives. But at the end of the day, what everybody's doing, the energy, the movement, the intensity, the loudness of class, it's not for everybody. And that's okay. When I started to lean into that is when things actually started to go well for me. And you've heard that a million times, but please try to put it into practice. If you think you are putting it into practice, look again, actually see if that is the case. And don't judge yourself too soon. This is one of my favorite ones. Don't judge too soon in anything in life, but at the same time, especially about yourself. In an example of my yoga teaching, if I would have judged too soon, by how I was feeling after my first class, that I had to repeat the audition because I did not get approved. I did not get accepted in my first class. I didn't get rejected, but I had to redo it. If I would have judged then, or if I would have judged when I moved back to Seattle and actually started teaching full time for the first time ever, and I had 6 people in my class for probably 2 months, if I would have judged then, I would have judged much too soon. I would have said, this doesn't seem to be working out. I'm not naturally good at this, or people don't seem to be interested in what I have to offer. Don't judge too soon. There's been so many celebrity examples of this kind of thing too. And one of the ones that's always stood out to me is when Tony Robbins said that he judged himself too soon because he wanted to have a seminar. And in the seminar, he didn't even fill up one conference hall, and he was really feeling bummed about it. And then he saw a colleague that had filled up an entire stadium, and he judged way too soon there because he was saying, I'm not at that level, right? All the time we have these examples, and I have them too on social media. A lot of times it's like you'll look at what you're producing, and then you'll look at what somebody else is producing, and you'll say, man, I just fail in comparison to this. The quality, the style, the ease with which they speak. And then you find out, no, actually they've been doing this. If you scroll down, they've been doing this. This is probably their post number 1000, right? And you have done it 3 times. So don't judge too soon. And at the same time, be attuned to feedback and be aware of what it is that you are doing. Sometimes we put these labels on ourselves as teachers and even as people when we go throughout life, which is that we'll say, oh, I'm too shy, I'm too lazy, or I'm too quiet, I'm too anxious, right? And we start to excuse away our possibility. Do not excuse away your possibility. You need to define how it is that you want to show up and teach. If you want to show up and teach confident, if you want to show up and teach the most soothing class, whatever it is, define that. And I can tell you right now, it's like if you want to do that little mental exercise, if you could make people feel any way and you would know that your presence just brought that about, what would you want it to be? I would say inspired. That's mine. Sorry, I answered before when I told you to think of your own. But think of your own, actually. Think about it. And whatever you've just thought of, I have really good news for you because that already exists as a seed within you. It really does. Otherwise, it wouldn't be important to you. It wouldn't have come up for you. So don't excuse away your possibility and, know your craft as a teacher, but also know that a lot of times it comes down to knowing your worth and being brave enough to deliver your gift to others. Our gifts always require boldness to be brought into the world. That is a fact, and that is something that is cultivated. It doesn't need to be some God-given gift that either you were given or you were not, or a title that you will achieve or will be bestowed upon you at some point later down the line. That is cultivated right now, the moment that you decide that you want it to be. I have seen time and time again in my own patterns and the patterns of students and teachers all around me that we show up for class often for who a teacher is being. And that can be the most annoying thing in the world to those of us who have, studied and we have mastered and we are excellent. And then you see a newer teacher who you don't approve of their form and you don't approve of this and you don't approve of that. And their class is just packed and people are loving it. It's just packed and they're loving it, right? This is what I found. I learned this lesson the hard way in the academic world. So I don't feel like I've gotten hung up on it as much in the yoga teacher world, because it can give you a lot of imposter syndrome, right? If you don't know as much as other people or whatever. But in the academic world, I studied so hard and I got these incredible grades, as I blabbed to you at the beginning of this episode. But at the end of the day, I have not been more successful or more abundant or any of the things, compared to the other people that were in my class or around me who probably got way worse grades than I did. So it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't speak to your ability to share those ideas with other people. And a lot of times that all comes down to presence and getting yourself ready energetically. So yes, the way that you prepare for class, it could be anything. I actually have totally turned away from doing anything special because I don't want to be attached to a ritual or a routine. I want to know that I can trust myself no matter what. But definitely, as you start to visualize how you want people to feel, try to bring that state into you as well. I like to dance a lot before I teach. Especially if I've just had my head in the computer all day. And that has been for me just the way that I get ready, I guess. So do prepare. As I mentioned, the fear is a symbol that you're probably not as prepared as you could be. And sometimes we can't be prepared for something that we haven't experienced yet. It doesn't work that way. So there's going to be a little bit of natural fear. Don't worry too much about the nerves and the shakiness and the adrenaline, all of that kind of stuff. Just know that that's there to keep you hyper focused and you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I know I said that I was going to share what I wrote at the end of the episode, but then I remembered that I thought this was going to be the end of the episode. But please don't leave yet, because I actually have some other really important things I want to say that this episode and this conversation will not be complete without. So don't leave me, but I want to share with you right here this piece that I wrote about stepping up to the plate, stepping up to the plate in terms of going to teach that class, pushing yourself, doing something that makes you uncomfortable. And I want to share it with you because as I was thinking about this idea of fear versus nerves, this is what came up for me. So without further ado, here we go. Untitled piece from yesterday morning. When we step up to the plate at the game of life, there are an incredible number of steps and checkpoints that have to fall perfectly into place. Like sending a human to the moon, it wasn't a door-to-door service. It wasn't delivered on a silver platter or like Uber Eats. It was a 3-part journey. There was no one there to call to save you. Talk about loneliness and fear. You either figure it out or die trying, with the whole world watching you, waving your flag with excitement in their eyes. They wouldn't be watching if it wasn't a seemingly impossible feat, one quite literally made of dreams, tears, and hopes that mankind has poured into the night sky staring at the moon. But he wouldn't have made it if that very uncharted path hadn't somehow become a path of ease. It's like he knocked enough times at the door of the universe and suddenly the door popped open as if they had been expecting us this whole time. The invitation was always open. We realize only the moment we finally open our eyes. To jump blindly on blind positivity alone is to miss the wild rush of looking into the eye of the storm and choosing it anyways. Surrender is not enough without knowing. Fear is not the same as pre-game nerves. Fear means you are unprepared. You haven't turned your face towards what is to come. Nervous simply means you are ready. What do you think about that? I find it to be inspiring. So your preparation is maybe your poses, your cues, your Dharma chat, your studying of whatever philosophy makes the most sense for you, that gets you excited. Maybe it's also your energetic preparation as well. It could also be your lifelines. My lifelines are having something to sip, because I don't know what it is, but the minute I start to speak, I just inevitably get a little tickle, and there's nothing worse than a panic tickle when you're trying to be soothing. A sweat rag, because a lot of times students sweat on me and I don't want to sweat on my students. I don't think I have yet, but I don't want to do that. So a sweat rag, otherwise it makes me really nervous because I am like overthinking. My eyes are not on the road. My eyes are on how much I'm sweating. The ability to change the music, to turn the volume up and down, is another lifeline for me. Setting up the class, you can ask students to move their mats. It's your room. You design the space and the experience, right? So setting up class in a way that allows me to assist as much as possible. Another way that you can prepare is by watching yourself teach, and stop watching only what other people are doing and start to watch what you are doing as well. Let that sense of teaching self and creativity start to develop a little bit independently from outside experience, or outside influence rather. Getting immune, by the way, to the cringe and the way that you talk, and just seeing yourself do things. We cannot go through life having cringe, seeing ourselves do things. It just does not make sense. I don't know why we have that biological function. It's really unfortunate, because it's like what we're here doing is doing things. So we need to be able to watch ourselves do that, to understand what the hell is going on and how we can make some changes, and also to see the good in what we are doing. A big one for me was coming to understand that your voice is like an instrument, and you are not necessarily born knowing exactly how to play that instrument. If you want your voice to be soothing, or you want your voice to be exciting, that's why we need to listen. I think that's why it throws us off so much to listen, is because we think we sound one way, and actually what we're portraying is something different, and we just have to close that gap a little bit. So get used to listening how your voice sounds, and notice if you're repeating things or you're imitating others. Natural imitation is going to occur. It is absolutely going to occur, but start to get a little bit more of a feel and an understanding of how often that is occurring and how often it's not occurring. Notice also if you can be a little bit okay with silence. This is one that I catch myself all the time getting a little bit like, feeling uncomfortable and a little bit frozen up, is because there's just more silence than I expected or intended there to be. If teaching makes you deeply uncomfortable, notice why. And when I say deeply uncomfortable, I don't mean like the whole time, but if there are moments, I guess I should specify, within the class experience that make you feel uncomfortable, notice why. And as I reflected on this question that I'm posing to you, I feel uncomfortable teaching when the class feels like it's uphill. Like it feels like the energy and excitement that I'm dishing out is not landing, and it's almost like clashing with just the heaviness and the low energy of the class. And so at a certain point, yes, you want to bring people up, or, bring them whatever experience, but also from a place that translates for them. And the other thing that will do it is when I am not feeling in alignment, when I'm feeling deeply off about something in my own personal life, stuff that you can't really control. But the best thing for that is to practice what you teach, right? Just make the 5 minutes, do the little breath work or something to get yourself feeling a little bit more like you've walked the talk, to at least put yourself more into alignment, even if the things around you are not fixable, because you hear this a lot. It's like the funny videos that have been going around on TikTok and Instagram where it's like the yoga teacher tells you, even if you're in a crisis, even if the weather is really affecting you, even if you don't have any money, even if your house is burning, and it's like, okay, obviously I'm not going to be able to tune that stuff out, but it's not really about tuning it out. It's making sure that you've at least made an effort to clean up the energy that you're bringing to the class a little bit. And I hope that makes sense. But those are the two that make me uncomfortable a bit still nowadays. Next up is learn to take up space in the room. You know the difference when you walk into a room that is just pleasantly furnished. The lighting is good. There's some soft looking couches that you can hang out on. There's things to lean against. And the difference between how my apartment is right now, because this is the very last episode that I'm recording here in this apartment. I can't believe it. I just realized that. But my apartment is all empty. It's just weird. This backdrop is fake. This is not as put together as my apartment is right now. It's not fake. I mean, it's real, but it's the only thing left standing. It's the only plant in my house. And there's a really big difference, right, when you walk into those kind of rooms. So think about that. You can take up space energetically in your room. Give people something to lean on, don't make it echoey and open and weird and vacant because you're just so small. And by small, I don't mean physically small. I mean, you're just plain small. You don't want to be too loud. You don't want to annoy people. You don't want to step on toes, and you're just going to be really careful. You can do this thing or you can do this thing because anything is fine. It's okay. Like that kind of behavior versus stepping up and leading, like giving them something to lean on and not being forceful about it, but just saying, yeah, come along. Like, let's do this. This is going to be great. You're doing fantastic, whatever. But let yourself fill up space, even with your voice. Learn to project your voice as much as you can in a soothing way. That's a trick. That is a trick for sure. Also set boundaries. This is, as I'm talking about, give something for people to lean on. Set your boundaries, decide. You can get really uncomfortable really fast if you allow people to overshare to you, and they're going to probably look up to you in lots of different ways, but you're not responsible for them, right? You're inviting them into an experience that is defined by you, for you, so that you can better take care of your energy, and therefore it's circular, show up better for them as well. Allow yourself constant evolution. Keep learning. At least one big learning push every couple of months is really worth it. And I mean immersing in learning. If you say, okay, I financially cannot invest in a course right now, I understand that. I would argue probably the priorities are what are preventing you from investing in some kind of course, because actually courses that are a couple $100, you could put away a little bit from what you earn teaching and you could reinvest that back into yourself. But even so, there are things that you can do for free, but I mean more than just watching a YouTube video or more than looking at tutorials or seeing how so-and-so does their creative sequencing. I mean an immersion in, you're taking a day or two off, or you're taking the whole weekend and you are deep diving into something to the point that you know it. You can also find this by seeking out people who are 10 steps ahead of you and adding value to them in some way in exchange for learning from them on a deep level. And that should help keep things fresh and flowing. Let yourself, I'm already evolving. Every time I say that I have a come to Jesus moment with yoga, it's because I realize what I'm doing is no longer working. It's no longer exactly what I want to do. So let that happen. You don't need to have run away from, like I did, run away from organized religion and only to fall back into another very strict set of beliefs that were the liberation or the freedom that I was once dreaming of. And yeah, the stakes are high for you to show up and teach your class, but they're not high in the way that you think. The stakes are high because the world needs your teachings, and the world will benefit from your teachings. And that is a fact. You need, right, to share your spark too, a lot of times in order to keep the life force energy flowing and to feel that sense of purpose and that sense of drive. So the stakes are high, not because of that people are judging you or that you must deliver the most perfect class ever, which I can already tell you that that's not going to ever happen. It's not ever going to happen for me either, because, man, there are they're not infinite number of yoga teachers. There's a lot of yoga teachers in the world, and everybody has different preferences. So you're off the hook of teaching the perfect yoga class. So now that you're off the hook of teaching that perfect one, the stakes are high just for you to keep showing up and to keep evolving and pushing that upper limit of how much, how far can you bring the experience towards your dream experience? I think dream is a better word than perfect, I guess. And I know that if you are listening today, there is a part of you that feels drawn to overcoming the fear of teaching, or that feels drawn towards becoming very comfortable in something that perhaps gives you a bit of discomfort right now. And so you really owe it to your community and to your circle to work on it, not to perfect it, but to take a small step. And so I have a challenge for you to take a small step, and that is to speak in a moment that you normally wouldn't speak. So back to the elevator example, right? Say hi to somebody or ask them a question. Speak in a meeting at work that you don't usually speak in, and say something more than I agree. Speak even in a moment when you're not being asked to speak, because that puts you on the offense. That puts you into the space of having to also ask yourself how you feel. And when you ask yourself how you feel and what it is that you want to share, guess what you learn? You learn in that process. You grow in that process. So I have that challenge for you. And I would even up that challenge. If you're not somebody who currently speaks on social media and you say, okay, I really want to get over this fear of speaking, then I would say, hey, why don't you speak on stories? Or why don't you speak in a reel? Why don't you do a talking head video if you've never done one of those? And actually push past that intense amount of discomfort and weirdness around the whole thing. If you're already super comfortable with that, first of all, send me your business card because I've got things for you to do. No, but seriously, talk on a topic, maybe, perhaps, or in a tone, or, when you change the context, sometimes when you record, then you realize, oh, actually, I got really good in this particular lane. And that can happen to us as yoga teachers too, where we get really good in the namaste, sort of gentle vibe, but then you try to bring in something else and you don't quite know how it is that you should act. And so that can be very interesting because there is no particular way, of course, that you should act. But yeah, just remembering at the end of the day, this is going to be my last little tip in getting comfortable teaching, is that remember that we are floating on a rock in the middle of the infinite universe, and it doesn't really matter, does it, if you forget a student's name, or if your uncle sees your story on Instagram and he thinks it's weird. Or somebody that you used to play soccer with when you were in middle school sees it and they think it's weird, right? Who cares? Really, really doesn't matter. And to make it a full circle moment, if somebody takes your class and they think it's weird and they don't come back, but you did your best and you showed up with what you could do, and probably if they came back a year later, it wouldn't even be the same class. You could be so much more proficient and they could still think it's weird just because they think it's weird. But it doesn't matter. Let your class be a work of art, because your class is a work of art, and it is okay to judge the work of art as an artist, but don't judge the artist. Don't judge yourself for that. That does not say anything about your value or your potential. Don't judge yourself too soon, okay? I'm watching you. Literally watching you. So may your quest to continue refining your art be grand and exciting and fun at the end of the day. All right. Wow, ended with a nice little voice crack there. Quick reminder too, if before we get to the emoji at the end of the episode, to check out the podcast Launchpad if you were curious about working with me more directly. I also extremely appreciate that, and I love getting to know people that resonate with what I am saying, because if you're spotting it in me, I know it's in you as well. So let's work together. Let's build this thing. The emoji that we'll do for today is going to be, wow, this is hard because I'm like, do I choose a classic sort of yoga teacher related symbol? Actually, I'm going to choose just a normal teacher symbol. I'm going to choose the apple emoji. I feel like I'm repeating emojis too. I don't know if we've done the apple one, but it's like when you give your teacher an apple. I only once ever gave a teacher an apple, but we'll say that. The apple emoji. Drop that in the comment section on Spotify or on my latest post on Instagram, and I will catch you next time. Ciao, ciao. If you enjoyed this episode of the Leadership in Yoga podcast, please take a moment to drop me a rating and subscribe. Also, if you're able to share this podcast with the world, it is greatly appreciated. Thank you.